So we had a talk earlier at like 2 p.m. and then you at 3 p.m. So we've been here all day. And like Mireille said, we're tired too. um, I don't know if I have a specific question, but I would like to maybe know, because there's one thing that that I've brought up in my talk earlier, is lateral oppression. And coming, like, I'm based in Berlin, and like, we run a center dedicated to like queer feminist, anti-racist, diasporic perspectives. So we do arts and culture, like I've mentioned earlier, sorry that's going to be a repetition for some of you, but we're also kind of using that work to heal, to empower, to kind of cry, to release. And my chat earlier was about the necessity of safe spaces and how they can save lives. What's also real is that within communities we tend to, especially in Berlin, I don't know if it's similar here, but we tend to like practice actively, whether consciously or subconsciously, lateral oppression, which I mentioned earlier is like resulting from the oppression that our bodies or we have experienced and kind of turn into other people of the same community, which I find extremely problematic. And I think especially in a space where white people are present, it's specifically harming ourselves and our communities. So I'm just wondering, as a politician, or like also as an artist, have you experienced that? And if so, like how do you deal with that?
Well, I think you wouldn't believe me if I said I hadn't experienced it. It's everywhere all the time, and Berlin, I can imagine, just like Amsterdam, where I'm from, or the Netherlands, more general. The white perspective is the major, the dominant perspective. So everywhere you go, everything you do, that's going to be dominant. And I think every black person or person of color, the same way every queer person, gay person, trans person, female person will recognize that from an early age you learn the necessary skills of survival. Some of them could be code switching, some of them could be the way you dress, the way you present yourself, the partner you choose, all kinds of things that for most white people I think are subconscious decisions, maybe subconscious isn't the right word, but anyway, not as deliberate decisions. For black, let's say black, queer, etc. People, these are survival tactics. So yes, I know this, and I experience this a lot, even in my work today in Parliament. Just imagine being that space invader in such an environment. So I've been in Parliament for 18 months, maybe almost going to 2 years. It'll be 2 years in March. And I've deliberately been told, even before that, when I was in the Dutch City Council, I've been told that I should know my place, should know when to speak. I should not always be angry, because I'm the angry black woman that we just saw in the previous presentation. The simple fact that the way I express myself, be it through my clothes or my hair or whatever, you know, everything you do is a statement basically, and every choice you make, you have to make it deliberately. Like, it's like before, it's decreasing now, but before I would always, you know, before entering a room, it's like, okay, how much of myself am I taking into this room? Who will be in the room? How will I be perceived? How will I be welcomed? Will I even be welcome? If I'm not welcome, how am I going to make sure that I'm still going to stand my ground and do what I came to do? These things. So it's very much present, like on a day-to-day basis, but I cannot imagine it not being that for every person of color or black person or woman or on a day-to-day. So I agree with you that those safe spaces can save lives. And I've seen it early on because when I was a dancer, I used to work in clubs a lot. And one of the clubs was a very renowned club in the Netherlands called the IT, and it was one of the first like big popular queer clubs. And not being part of the community myself, I did recognize that this was a safe place for people. This was where they could shake off their 9-to-5 day-to-day and come in the weekend and be who they really are. And I can only imagine what would have happened to them and their health if they had not had such a place. So I've always recognized that safe spaces are very important. Let's just say that politics is not a safe space. Yeah. But you've made a deliberate choice to create such a space. I wasn't here for your presentation, I'm very sorry, but maybe you've shared this already, but there must have also been an event leading up to that conscious decision.
A number of events, a lot of events. And it was similar to you, where I've, like, growing up in Germany, I've internalized that racism. And then instead of tackling it, I just left. Yeah. So I left for like 10 years and then came back. So it was coming back, I felt like there was even more presence of fascism. Like suddenly, there was a party called the AfD. They say so much like really crazy shit that, I mean, who allows that? You know, and then you have someone else who wants to free Palestine and they're being censored. You know, and that's something that's like it's incredible, and it shows the horrific kind of development in the West, or anywhere in the world, really. We've come to a point where we're kind of trying to neglect what's expected from us, and we're just creating works out of literally personal needs. And that's like within the community, within our circles, we're also like 98% black and brown people, queer and trans, in the team. And we are catering to our communities, which pisses off a lot of people, the white people. And I've mentioned that to one person in the break. We've been receiving like hate threats, like hate messages, like cut out letters, and like out of the movie. And I'm like, okay, like, do we just shut it down and leave? Do we pull out? Do we challenge that status quo, or do we invest more energy and time to leave a better world behind for our children and grandchildren? And we're doing that, but I feel we're also being limited in so many ways. The challenges that come with running a space, the challenges that come with being funded for that space, for meeting expectations. So you have to kind of find your way. And we're being attacked by politicians as well, like neighbors and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, it's really that space that when we go to work, it's a physical space, but it's also like a mental space, or when we go to team retreats, is that moment where we say one thing and everyone gets me, or like they say one thing and everyone gets us. And so like having these spaces where we can really release, where we can cry, where we can break down and not be judged, and just being able to support each other is literally surviving. Like it's allowing us to survive, and it's allowing the space to survive. So I think, that's...
Yeah, I would like to say something about what you say, because hearing you is just, I feel that creating this space and this safe space is like the double sanction that, not exactly the one that Fanon is talking about, but it's still a double sanction, because you are living racism, we are living racism, plus we have to create our own space to be safe, because I feel that we don't dare go into political. We don't dare doing politics, so we are doing politics in our own way, because I also started an art center in Brussels. But just because we have this, maybe part of the reason could be that we have this certitude that it would be too dangerous. Like, I have this certitude that it would be dangerous to me to start political stuff, because I think that people would start, like, I would be in danger, like, really. I should be careful with my son, you know, and how, like, if someone would come and talk to us in the streets, I would be afraid, okay, is he a friend or is he coming to insult us or, you know, to fight us? Just when I'm doing about art, about decolonial stuff, about anti-racist stuff, about feminist and ecological things, I sometimes feel in the public that some people are looking at me and I'm like, oh.
Oh, but I think your fear is just. All of these things happened to me. Death threats, people coming to visit my house. And I've always said, I have to be honest, I've always said I don't know if I could do this if my children were still in school. Mm-hmm. They are grown, so it's a little bit more safe. But if my child was still in school, I don't know if I would have the guts to do it. But I was going to say that what you are doing, you say that, you know, you're scared maybe to go political, but you already are acting political. It's a political statement to say, I'm claiming my space. And I'm claiming a space for us. That in itself is a political act to me. And when I said earlier that I made a conscious decision to do my part in this shape and form, I'm recognizing that the other shapes and form are just as political and just as important. I would never have opened my mouth if it wasn't for the activists who had opened their mouth before. They gave me the courage and they gave me the sense that from my privileged position at the time, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. So I think every time we organize, we speak up, we show, like through our art, that is a political act to me. And I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for everybody else doing their job. And I hope that my job is part of why other people can do their job. So again, from the intersectional ideal that, for instance, my party holds, is that everything is connected, the marginalizations are connected, the answers to the marginalization should be connected, and all of our actions are connected. So even if we don't know each other, the fact that you create such a space in Berlin is actually a gift to my work, you know? So I think that, yeah, we are all political activists.
Yeah, and also the second thing that made me think, okay, maybe I'm already doing politics, but like I didn't go for politics with a party, and it's also maybe because until like I met you, I had never seen someone like me. And it's not that you don't have any other black women into Belgian parliaments. It's just they're not like you, and they don't have what I recognize of myself into you. They're definitely different. So when we speak about black identities, I also tried to explain that earlier, that we are multiple. It's not, you don't have one black woman.
But that's why I loved your answer to the question, and you said that it's a beautiful thing that black people don't all share the same opinions. Because that's the first thing we always have to explain. There's so many interviews that journalists come to me and say, "Oh, I spoke to this black person and he or she has a different opinion." Like, duh. But regarding to what you said earlier, that was very poignant for me when I realized that I wanted to step into politics. I could have joined different political parties, but I also, and I did join a political party before I founded my own. But it was a political party of which I knew that I would be able to speak from my own, well, at least I hoped, from my own identity. And I know that entering a political party would be entering another white space,
Yeah.
where I would have to struggle the same struggles that everyday life was already bringing me, and that was exactly why I went into politics, to break with that. So I knew that, and also I knew that I would literally be in danger, because if I joined a existing political party, I wasn't going to enter and be number 76 on the list. I wasn't going to do that. Not because of my ego, but, well, not just because of my ego, partly because of my ego. But I also knew that if I would join a existing political party, and then let's say they would say, oh, Sylvana, you're well known, so here's spot number 3 or 2, that immediately puts me in danger. Yeah. So I knew I had to do it from my own marriages, and also if I really wanted to represent the people that I said I wanted to represent, we had to create our own narrative, and we're still doing it. I mean, it's not something that's ever finished. So it had to be from our own perspective. And I do think that it shows very much how different we operate and how different we exercise this game of politics from other parties who come from, who just have a different identity for the mere fact that they're not run by black women. It's as simple as that. There's a question.
I have a question for all of you, actually, because you're all working in different types of, or in different areas of society. So I was curious, we scratched on this topic earlier this evening, and I'm curious, when or how do you experience this instrumentalization because of you and who you are? And I'm curious, does it make you angry or hopeful? And yeah, I hope I can how do you experience this moment of feeling probably instrumentalized by society, by whiteness, and yeah, because of this, you mentioned it earlier, because of this wokeness of colonialization and stuff, and I guess in every area, it's it's somehow woke, and I try to figure out how you feel about this, or if you, and then in the end, how can we resist to instrumentalize human body, and
I think it's very difficult to resist this instrumentalization that you're talking about, because this instrumentalization is the tool of capitalism. So it's everywhere. It's like you do something, like you decide to speak up about anti-racism, about decolonization, or even about feminism. And then someone bigger, with more means, someone of the dominant world, sees that, oh, she might have an ounce of power, so let me shut her down. And there are many ways to shut you down. Maybe the person can offer you a job. Maybe the person can invite you at its institution. There are so many different ways, but this person or this system will always try to find a way to shut you down. And it's always, so I think it's like a process. It's not, okay, now I have done this, so this situation is solved. It's always constantly evolving and resisting. And that's why I think it's also so much tiring, because it's taking your mental space all the time, all the time.
Yes, I really recognize that. It's a constant job. And what you're saying about the ways of shutting you down, I can tell you like 5 to 10 different ways they've tried to shut me down. So it started with fake news, for instance. There was this one website, before the incident that I just told you about in the talk show, this website had never written my name on their website, ever, ever. From that moment on, every single day, they brought out a story about me that wasn't true. That story would lead to hate. That hate would lead to threats at my person, my house, my children, my loved ones. I went to court. I was the first person in the Netherlands to go to court and have 22 people convicted of racism. It hadn't been done before, but I was like, racism is illegal. It's against the law. It's a crime. We're going to court. And the cases we brought to court weren't even the worst ones, because it's very difficult to prove. I have this picture on my phone. It's like it was a rape fantasy that somebody sent me, where in detail they described what they were going to do with me, how they were going to rip out my nails, watch me burn, rape me first or after. I don't even remember. That's again. That's how they try to shut me down. And sometimes it's not even that deliberate, because the same website that started writing about me every day, the other websites that used to write about me when I was a friendly TV presenter, now I don't exist anymore. So there's all kinds of different ways where they will come at you. I mean, I literally, in Parliament, people have told me that I should shut up, that I do not have the right to speak. Literally, and they have no shame about it. And I think 9 out of 10 times they are not aware of what they're doing. Not to say that it's not deliberate. It's deliberate, but they're not aware of all the layers that we are discussing right here. So when you make, but then I also realized that it made me want to fight harder, because this will happen anyway, regardless of me speaking up, regardless of me entering politics, regardless of us doing what we do. It happens anyway. So it might as well happen while speaking for myself, while I'm doing something to make it better for the next generations. I always say, Charlie's here, we work together. I always say, he can vow, we are not going to reap the fruits of the work that we do. I will be dead before the results come in. But we still have to do it. Because we can, and this one thing that struck me from Paul Robeson when I read his quote, the artist has to choose. The artist has to choose, has to use their platform, their skill, their talent, anything, to weigh in on societal issues. The first 20 years of my career, I wasn't having that. I was just a single mom making bread and butter for her children and enjoying the fruits of her labor deliberately. But as soon as I did get aware, in that very, very instant, I had no choice. I have to use my platform, my voice, my responsibility, my privilege. I have no choice. So the funny thing is that before I went into politics, I always used to say, oh, I don't work, I'm an artist. But I realized I used to work as an artist, and now that I'm a politician, now I don't work. Now I'm on a mission. That's a whole different thing.
Thank you. And I think while you mentioned his website that's writing about you, I don't think you need them, because yeah, for sure. But what you're doing is also you're representing and you're embodying something that was completely unthought of. So I think you're mobilizing with your existence in itself. In that parliament, I mean, I don't know the depth of it, but I'm sure you're inspiring people, and I'm sure you're allowing people to think bigger. You know, so representation matters. I've mentioned that earlier. It's absolutely important. The black group, Ariel, the black mermaid, seeing the reaction of black children, especially girls, it's just, it's not working right. But is everyone hearing me? Do I need it?
We are hearing.
My voice is very low, right? Yeah, it's absolutely important and it's necessary, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for going through all this re-traumatizing journey to empower the people that are coming after. You know, I hope that their voices, white people, and those who've tried to oppress your voices and who've told you to know your space, they're going to disappear.
Definitely. They're going, like Oprah said, they're going to die. This is a given. A lot of them are going to die. We don't have to help them. But also, a lot of them will be taught and will do better. And then there's also, like, I think it's a year ago, I went to Parliament and I wore my hair out, I wore my fro out. And I didn't realize it was such a big thing. But then I was walking the street and young black women were like crying. Like, I never thought I'd see a fro in Parliament. I remember one moment, the day, Dutch Parliament is right across the street from here. And before I was inaugurated, we had a little get-together outside, right in front of this building. They organized it for me as a send-off party. And at the send-off party were like all of the people that we embraced. So there was this crew of drag queens over there, and there was older people, white people, young people, black people, and there was a group of older Surinamese, as we call them, biggie smas, which means big people, older people, the elderlies. And there was one Surinamese elder, and she was in traditional clothing, and she whispered in my ear before I went for my first day in Parliament, and she whispered in my ear and she said, if you go over there and you just sit there for 4 years and say nothing, you will have done the greatest thing. And I took that energy with me to Parliament because I realized she was so right. And it really helps me to, in a strange way, it does help me to speak, knowing that I don't have to speak, but knowing that my presence in the room in itself is historical. It makes my job so much easier because I don't have to prove anything, I just have to be. And obviously we work so hard, but you understand why it was so deep? What this meant when she said you don't have to do a thing. Just go there, just be in the room. That blew my mind. It blew my mind, and I think that's, again, the same thing you're doing, because I really want to emphasize that I could go into Parliament every day, but if there's nobody out there materializing on a day-to-day basis what I'm preaching over there, then it's still lost. So we are definitely all doing it together, whether we know it or not. And we are fighting for our space, centimeter by centimeter. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. Do we still have time? Yeah, I would like to share something because, you know, like your experience just remind me. So I grew up in Belgium with Congolese parents, and but then my parents were studying, and then when my father finished his studies, he just couldn't stand Belgium. He went back to the Congo, but my mom thought it was better for the kids to stay there. And she took the Belgian nationality. And so the first time she had the right to vote, she was so proud to have become a Belgian citizen that, you know, I was the youngest of the family, so she took me by the hand, and I really have this memory, you know, like my mom took me by the hand and we went to vote. And it was a sunny day, and we had to stand in the line for 2 hours that were like a nightmare. because my mom wore her most beautiful clothes. Yeah, now you know. Now you see where I'm coming. And the people were just like shocked. Like, who does she think she is? How dare she comes here to provoke us in our land? You know, and it was just, for me, it was, and I think from both of us, it was 2 hours of agony, you know, and just to say that I think that your experience is like the the response. Like, maybe you're not genetically her daughter, but still her daughter went to the parliament. But also because...
Definitely.
Yeah, I have to repeat it. There are other black women in the parliament in Belgium, but they don't have this view of, you know, intersectionality. I think for me it's also very important to speak about ecology, to speak about the LGBT queer communities. It's also important to speak about feminism. And this is really like the new
Yeah.
generation, or maybe not so new, but I think it's really something important and that we need to see and to hear, because that's the future. That's, for me, being really decolonial.
Yes, and I think that I can so relate to that story of your mom putting on her most beautiful dress to go and vote, and being proud of it, and then meeting this energy of you're an intruder. So that's also something. So you can't win, right? So you don't participate, and it becomes something that's used against you, and then you do participate, and it becomes something that is used against you, and you can just not win. And just your mere presence in that line, in that queue, is offensive. Just you being there is offensive. Exactly. Let alone you dressing up for the event, because I'm a very vain girl. I dress up every day for work, and it's offensive, you know? So we're not the first to encounter this, and we're also not the first to oppose it, but I think we are the loudest in a long time. So I think in the 60s and 70s, a lot of our aunties did what we're trying to do now. Maybe didn't materialize into a seat in parliament, but we had the feminist groups, and we had the joint feminist groups, like of black women, for instance, or in the Netherlands it was women from Morocco and Turkey who were coming over, and they did organize. But then economically things were going too well at some point, so we had no need to be angry anymore, because we were all enjoying the fruits of capitalistic labor. So now so then we believed the story that, and this is something you see a lot when it comes to emancipation. The women thought they were, the second wave feminists thought they were done as soon as they had the same jobs the men did. The first wave of gay activists thought they were done when they were accepted in the white male workforce, when they were equally with the white men. So we at some point all started to believe that, you know, we're good. We are allowed to go to work. We have our own free choice as women. So as women, you know, it's done. And in this country in particular, we believe the story that we don't see the differences between people. We're all equal. So in this country, the thing is, I don't see color.
Yeah, Belgium too.
Well, you know, and then, like you said, we internalize that, so we are making every effort for them not to see color, so we're relaxing our hair, we're wearing Western clothes, and we're just adjusting as well as we can. And also, I think, because, at least for my parents, I think my parents accidentally strived for assimilation, accidentally. But they had to, that was their generation, they were just, this was the best option for them, and it's thanks to that I can sit here and articulate myself this way and claim my space. So I also believe that every generation has a different assignment in this continuing process of emancipation.
Totally.
Did that answer your question?
I totally forgot it.
About instrumentalization, I want to mention one thing, and then you can answer the question. You can ask a question. So last year, in 2021, there was a black woman in a hospital. She had a surgery. She happens to be a politician, thankfully, so she had a certain outreach. After the surgery, a doctor came to her, and she complained about the pain. And the doctor told her that she should suck it up, because in Africa she would have been dead. There's this thing, and I mean, these are statistics from the US, because in Europe, or at least in Germany, people don't get funding to study or research racism in medicine. But there's this myth and stereotype that black bodies are more, like they can handle more, and that girls need to grow up faster. In 2016, they asked questions, they asked students, medicine students, who were enrolled in medicine school for the first 2 years, and they asked them if they believe black skin is thicker than white skin. 40% of them said yes. And that makes a huge impact in medicine and the way doctors handle black and brown bodies. I mean, the rate of a woman dying in childbirth is 4 times higher or more likely that she would die when she's black. So as soon as your body enters this world, you're already being instrumentalized, like you're already exposed to structural racism, whether it's anywhere. And I think the more you are aware of it, I mean, this whole, the terminology of POC or QT BIPOC or intersectionality is quite new recently, and also only accessible for a certain group of people. So we're using that to kind of broaden, to bring it to a wider audience, like everyone here, and I'm sure you do too. There were 2 older white couple here from Rotterdam, and I talked to them. They were here from the very beginning, and they said, we're here to, they've retired, we're here to learn so that we can have conversations with our grandchildren. And I think this is allyship, and I think that's really important to have here. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and understand that just because you don't have that experience, that it doesn't, I mean, you can disagree with someone's opinion, but not with their experience. So it leaves a bit of hope when everyone here leaves the room and they take what they've taken in and they share it with other people. I wanted to mention that, but I didn't want to put this person on the spot earlier. There was a white person or a white presenting person with locks. For me, this is super triggering, and I think having observed kind of that space allows them to understand their positionality and to maybe also acknowledge the fact that just because you've been maybe to Africa and India doesn't give you the right to appropriate someone's culture that's so deeply ingrained in empowerment, but also sourced in slavery. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that too. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you, and I think it's very difficult to pose a question, especially after all these voices that have been heard today. I think I would like to ask Sylvana something. How are you dealing with all these elements that you spoke about being on the parliament, but on top of it, dealing with a do normal society, which is, it's very interesting for me to understand how you will prioritize, let's say, on this arena of politics, on this specific environment.
Thank you. I think my answer personally is to provoke and just not do normal. So when I say I'm wearing my fro to Parliament, it's not a little thing. It's a big thing. It messes with everybody's mind. Because politicians don't wear fros. They're not female and black, party leader, wearing an afro, being all out there, being unapologetically black. So Can you imagine what it feels like when just your presence, and this is who I am, right? And just me being in the room, like the lady said, is a provocation. So I use it. I use it to confuse. Because I know there's not a lot I have to do. I just have to be in the room, and it's confusing in itself. I think that being an artist before I went into politics has given me the room to be loud now that I'm in politics. I don't pretend to be a politician that wears a suit and is, like I don't do respectability politics, basically. I try to be me. And I don't know how I handle it, because if I think about it too much, it gets too tiring, and I might just sometimes want to give up. So I just take it as something that is a natural phenomena, and that I don't really pay too much attention to. But I do know it's there all the time. So it's a bit of a...
In the beginning, you really clearly mentioned that in the end of the day, the top of this is really the capitalistic structure. So how are you going to reach that moment? You know, to really go to the core.
Like I said, I do not think I'm going to be there for that day. Because the most difficult part of opposing capitalism is that I think we don't have a ready-made answer. The answer is something that we are all going to have to create together. So it's going to take a very long time. This is my personal opinion. I don't think, a lot of people think if you oppose capitalism, then you are a communist or a Marxist, and that's the answer, and that's it. I wish it was that simple, but it's not. I think that we are now in the day and age where we have to strive to create that answer. And it's an ideal that has never been around, because it will include voices that have never been heard. It will include genders that have always been denied. It will include so many things that were never allowed. So it's going to be amazing. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so magical, we cannot even imagine it right now. But I'm lucky to say I will not be there for the answer. My job is to open the doors now, is to invade those spaces and make way. I have no idea about the outcome, and it's not my responsibility. Not to say that I don't care. I hope you don't get me wrong. I'm just realizing this is my role now, and other generations will have to come, fill that space, and create what is necessary in that moment. It's going to be an evolving process. I don't have the answer. All I know that my job is to at least make a little wave so it can happen. But again, this is also something we are all doing simultaneously in different spaces at different times. And this is what I have to say about that. Maybe we think it's not going fast enough, which is true. At the same time, if I look back 10 years and I see what has happened in the past 10 years, we are going on crazy speed. So it's constantly being aware of that, and at the same time just letting it go. I can't deal with that thought every day because I won't get my job done. My job is just to be a space invader, and I'm not even a pioneer. I'm not the first. I didn't invent politics. But I am very, very, very convinced that we are going to get there, because we'll have no choice, because Earth, the climate, is going to force us to do better. All the voices that are now speaking up are going to force us to do better. Yesterday, news came out that in Volendam, which is a small village in the Netherlands, they've decided to say goodbye to the tradition of Black Pete. Now, this is something minor in the scheme of this happening all over the Netherlands, but it is something extremely huge if you know that village. And if you know the fact that 1 year ago, people were being threatened with their lives when they were protesting there, and violence was used readily. So if you think about that now, this year, they've made that, we have won already. All we have to do is validate it and come to terms, because then the difficult part is going to start, because now we are all going to have to come to terms with each other. That's going to be the most difficult part. Once we've fought the system, now we have to create a new system. But it will happen. It's inevitable. If it wasn't just not for Mother Earth forcing us to say goodbye to capitalism, for instance, it's not sustainable, I think. That's the most important thing. You are absolutely right. Patriarchy has to go. But they are intertwined, right? Capitalism is a patriarchal system, and I agree with you. And it's going to be interesting, because it's going to be nasty before it gets better. And what are we going to do with all these men? Like I said, you know, they're going to have. It's not my words though. It's Oprah. She said they're going to have to die, and I agree.
I'm sure you're very exhausted over there. We have one more question from Machiri.
I'm never exhausted from talking, so.
Is it okay for a last?
Okay. Hi, guys. Yeah, very insightful conversation indeed. But I just wanted to maybe add a piece or contribute, from my experience during the short time that I've been, around this city. I arrived yesterday in the evening, so I decided to venture around and get some food, see the place, close to the hotel. So I always do this, I attempted to enter a nightclub very close to the hotel, just to test out, what's going on. And yeah, they wouldn't let me in, and they gave me all sorts of reasons, but I could tell that, okay,
They wouldn't let you in?
They wouldn't let me in, I mean, I experienced, you feel it, right? You feel the air that, they will give you reasons. Today is this. And then I'm like, okay, can I come in tomorrow?
Members only today.
Yeah, another reason for tomorrow. Can I come in the day? Okay, the day after. You know what? If I were you might want to try a few places, close by, because we have a specific audience and so forth. And I'm like, I could tell, So I experienced this not only here, in Europe, but also in Cape Town. I'm from Zimbabwe. I grew up in Joburg, and I spent a lot of time traveling in the country, in South Africa. And in Cape Town, it's there on Long Street. There is definitely, establishments where these bouncers, most of them from Congo, will not let you in. They will not let you in if you're a person of color, right? So it's happening everywhere. So then, it brings me to the question of, whilst I'm here, and sharing this space, the experiences of being here in Europe as a person of color, so to speak, as a black person, as an African, your experience, your political experience, your experience of resistance, your experience of marginalization here and mine, I think, different but also the same, So there's these differences that we have, right? These differences of being a black person who is based here in Europe, out in the diaspora, and me being an African based on the continent, And then there's this thing that emerges from that, right? From that event, this thing about offshore, the offshore black person, the diaspora black person. Mm-hmm. So, your resistance, your battle, your politics is now viewed as different to mine. And sometimes we have conflicts, me coming from the continent and you being here, because of other differences, and now it could be class, it could be economic. As we are, people that are from the space that is so, viewed as third world, underdeveloped, and so forth and so on. So when
what is your question?
I'm coming. So there's this thing, right? This disparity that we have between us, right? So my battle is how do we collapse these borders, because these borders that are prescribed, that are put before us, the separation makes the battle grueling and long, and tiresome, right? So that's the question that I bring, like, how do you relate? What is your relationship to the struggle that is happening? I mean, I have a lot to contribute. I'm actually trying to transition into, because I'm presenting, in about 30 minutes, so I'm trying to also transition into that, right? So how do we, because it's, what I'm presenting also relates to questions of migration, Paul Robson in experience in Europe and so forth, and how he meets the Africans there in Russia and all of that. So that's what I'm trying to do. So how do we, what is your, because I'm also trying to ask you.
I think we're ready to answer your question now. Yeah? Because
it's not necessarily a question, it's a discussion.
It's a very long introduction, and we're all trying to answer your question.
It's a discussion.
Can you repeat that question? No, I'm sorry. I think, like, if I understand correctly, you can nod or you can shake your head. If I understand correctly, are you criticizing black people in the diaspora in terms of, no, just shake or nod, like in terms of our proximity to the continent?
No, it was a more open question, right?
So how do we connect, and how can we together fight the system? Is that also?
How do we collapse the borders?
Look, I think it's very difficult, because I think it's not going to be useful at all if we see it just as a question but a discussion, because I'm trying to get into a discussion.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying it. Well, let me tell you how I heard your question. Where are the similarities in our fight towards the system?
Yeah.
Where do we find each other? Where are the similarities? But without disregarding the fact that we come from a different place fighting this battle.
Yes.
And I think that is the answer to your question. So first we have to understand that growing up in diaspora is a completely different experience than growing up on the continent of the motherland, right? It is a completely different experience. That in itself does not mean that there is no correlation or even a relation between the two. However, let's say my parents or my brothers and sisters, they grew up in a black country. Yeah. I did not grow up in a black country. So my sense of identity is completely different, because it's always related to where I was formed. In Amsterdam, we moved to the country when I was a bit older. So these are never going to be the same perspectives. The systemic fight, that's where the correlation and the relation is in the systemic fight. It's not in our personal experiences. Again, another difference between you and me is you're male. So your challenges are, have a different color from that perspective. Being black and female is a whole different experience than being black and male. And I think the most important thing is we shouldn't compare these experiences. We should combine these experiences, use them as a base for this systemic narrative that we're looking for, and pursue our joint fight from there on. However, as the gentleman over there said, for me as a black feminist, it's going to become interesting now. You are part of patriarchy. So as far as my loyalty to you goes, from all kinds of levels, at some point, you and I are going to have to go through that battle. Coming from those different perspectives. And it's something you could also put on the European perspective versus the African perspective, maybe even versus the American perspective. They're all different. So it's never going to be the same fight. But it will always have to be the strive for the same systemic change.
Yes. I mean, that's what I was trying to bring, that the intersectional aspect of this battle, that it begins on the continent, it begins with pinning the black subject on the continent of Africa and taking it off the continent, and then, you know, how those, the economic, the global, so-called global economic, I think,
the
a
interesting
scenario is still connects to how what is happening here economically is aided by depriving Africa of its what? Of its stability, right? The riches are here. It's directly connected, like there is like direct, you know, you know what I mean? So that's what I was trying to bring up, that intersectional aspect of that battle, because
Very true, but I also think that what you're seeing is that even though this may be true, the part of the process we're in is still narrow in a sense that we're just trying to survive in this context first, break through these barriers first, and then we're going to go to that barrier, and then we're going to go to that barrier. Or if you wish, you can also visualize it like that. So I can't be that my allyship will be from a very different perspective than yours, and your allyship towards me will be from a very different perspective.
Yeah.
So we should allow ourselves, I think, to make that journey, go through that journey, and that's why I'm saying there is no answer to capitalism as such, because we have to create it still, and we first have to get to know each other. But before I can get to the motherland, I'm fighting, so to speak. I've been, of course. Then now I'm just fighting here in Parliament, and it's a big job already.
Yeah. We give thanks.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up.
No, just I think the relationships in between the people from the diaspora living here in Europe and the people from Africa is a very huge topic, and I'm just not sure it's already the moment or the right time. And just to take my experience is that everything that I have tried to start in Africa or in the Congo, because this is where my family is from, has been a huge failure, because people there, how can I say that? They just think that it's even, how can I say that? They think that everyone that is coming from Europe has a lot of money and is someone that they can take advantage of. And I don't want to say that everyone thinks like that, but I think that it's so much a majority of the people that we will have to, when you said, you speak from a male perspective, and we would have to address the patriarchy thing. I think we will have to start addressing those questions too, before to be a lie, because we have to be true. And I think that the people, at least from my experience in the Congo, because it might be totally different in other countries, but they don't realize what we go through as being born here in Europe and growing up here. They just think that we are like spoiled children going in the street asking for more when we already have a lot. And so the thing that, and I also feel that the demand is always in one direction, like people are asking people from the diaspora to be more supportive of the people in Africa, when a partnership is always, it goes in both directions, and we should be able to speak about it. How can we support each other's struggles, and how can we reinforce each other's? But it's not going in one direction. Yeah.
Okay, so I think now we're talking. I think I do understand where you come from, and I understand your points, But I also want to point out that we have different privileges, and passport privilege is also real. And the fact that we can access a social system, or like unemployment money or health insurance, it's a reality. So yes, we're struggling with our own shit here, but colonialism is also not over in Africa, in the motherland. It's still present, and there are still heavily oppressive systems, lateral oppressive systems as well from within different communities of the same people. So I mean, I'm experiencing the same thing from also my parents who live in Africa, or my sister, and there are certain kind of expectations. And there is a brain drain that we have caused by leaving that country or by leaving Africa. And I think we forget, when I speak to some French people, I don't know if it's similar in Belgium, like they stop saying I'm African, they say I'm French. And this really irritates me, because I'm like, obviously you're not being acknowledged or seen as French in France. So, and your family is present. I mean, this is in case they were brought up by their own family and were not adopted by white families. So I think we do, like personally, I'm sure people have different kind of opinions, but personally I feel a certain level of commitment to give back to the motherland, and to also not necessarily give back, but to find ways where we can take the privilege of knowledge and knowledge sharing and realize that we do also exist in these communities. We do also exist in Africa. It's not all backwards. There are subcultures. There are people who we can connect with, and there are people who are strongly benefiting. And that was a question earlier after my talk. Like, how can we empower queer and trans communities in Africa? It's a privilege to be here and to be somewhat safe, or at least in a setting that allows us to not have to deal with like a day-to-day threat within our families, you know, like, yeah. So I think there's a level of commitment, and we'll be back.
I just want to add that, you know, you have to understand as well, because as I hear you speak, your roots are in the Congo. Like, my roots are in Suriname, which is like an extra stop before we get to the motherland. So it's again very interesting. And then maybe for next time, because I understand, you know, we have to wrap it up now, but we should bring religion into the game as well. You know, it's religion, it's patriarchy, it's the role of money, it's education, like so much. And I think that even though things are really moving fast, we are just starting the conversation. So thank you very much for your question.
Okay, thank you all very much for your courage, your bravery, for taking the time and the patience and coming to words. Thank you all very, very much for being with us. Yeah.